أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وشفيء ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيت طيبين الطاهرين سيما الحجة بقية الله الأعظم روحي وأرواحنا له فداء ولعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So the topic that we're going to dissect inshallah ta'ala will be about the topic of fear, or the concept of fear. So when we are talking about fear, normally it's related to the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, we're going to talk about a bit about the natural types of fear that occurs for a human being. Sometimes we fear death. Sometimes we fear, for example, to become a social loser. So we take an education. Sometimes we have the fear of being alone. So we seek towards marriage or marrying another person. All these types of fear occurs for a human being and they're natural. But there's one thing that we need to keep in mind, that just because something is natural doesn't mean that wherever you use that fear or you spend that fear, that's normally correct, or that's going to be beneficial for you. So the concept of fear in itself is logical. Why? Because sometimes you fear something out of logical reasons to save yourself or protect yourself. We have that what we call survival instinct as human beings, and that's normal. That's rational. But sometimes no, that fear is not justified. That fear is not justified. So you spend that fear on the wrong things, and that will have some unwanted consequences. So it's important for us to understand first and foremost that fear in itself is natural, but how we spend that fear, that's up to us. In other words, it is possible for you to, as a person, as a human being, to administrate the types of fear that you experience in life. It's possible, it's not impossible. So when we understand this point, we understand another thing as well. In a lot of cultures, on many parts of the world, fear is considered to be a sign of weakness. And being brave as a person is being a sign, it's a positive sign, it's a virtue basically. So if you ask the normal person or any person, even if they're Muslim or non-Muslim, they will agree with you to a certain extent that fear is something which is negative. They say it's a weakness when it comes to your responsibility or your duty. But when it comes to something which you neglect, they say it's still a sign of weakness. But being brave is always considered to be a positive thing. Why? You see that in different nations, when they refer to the history, they always refer to the brave parts, where they were brave and somehow, right? For example, when you talk about with Scandinavians, what part of history do they normally refer to? Vikings, right? Because they were these brave warriors. Nobody talks about that they behaved like ISIS. Nobody talks about that, right? Beheaded people, robbed people, raped people. Nobody talks about that. They focus on one specific thing, and that is being brave. In other words, the contradiction to that is fear. That's a sign of weakness. In other words, we were a strong nation, and that's a source of pride for us. Because being brave is a positive thing. It's a virtue, basically. So they forget all the crimes they committed in history and only focus on this one single virtue, trying to revive that virtue. But you know what happens? And having that fear in itself is not a bad thing. But sometimes you see a person, he has that fear and he admits it. That's not an issue. In other words, he has self-insight. He says, yeah, I fear death. What's the issue? I admit it. I'm not trying to hide it. The real issue, brothers and sisters, starts when a person does what? Bring up excuses to justify that fear. And you know what's even worse than that? When you bring out theories and you use text from the Holy Quran, from the religion, bring up logical arguments as if they're illogical to try to justify the different types of fear that you experience in life. You see, a lot of universities, we're going to define what we're talking about here. A lot of universities, even people from the house, unfortunately, when it comes to them being passive or when it comes to them not taking a stance against oppressors and so on and so forth, they bring up theories why they're not doing it. Once I had a discussion with a person, I remember a brother, he mentioned it as well. When they were asked this person, I asked him, Which country is the only country in the world that dropped a nuclear bomb on a civilian, on civilian population? It's the United States of America. And he actually said it was justified. Look, he's scared of actually bringing up to condemn this. Why? Because he knows he's attached to that country, specific country. So what does he do? He stopped bringing arguments. Yeah, but basically that stopped the war and it prevented a lot of people from getting killed. And yeah, of course, if you exterminate humankind on this earth, of course you won't have any war. That's obvious, right? But does that mean it's justified? No. So this person was bringing up theories to justify his fear. His fear of admitting what? That these people, they were wrong. And we are submitted to these individuals. Both ideologically, politically, he was afraid to say it straight up. And even when it comes to religion, dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about the scheme of shaitan, the plan of shaitan, you know what's the first point that he actually makes in the Holy Quran? When we think about sins, what is the first thing that comes to our minds when we think about sins? We say, hubbul maqam, hubbul jah, shahawat, right? That's the first thing that we think of. Robbing people, stabbing people, killing people. That's all bad. That's all sins. But do we think of a sin that is called fear when it comes to our responsibility? Look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so detailed and so precise explains the scheme of shaitan in the Holy Quran. He says, "Ash-shaytan ya'idukum al-faqr wa ya'murukum bil-fahsha." The first thing that shaitan he does, he scares you. Faqr does not mean poverty in this holy verse. It means the lack of anything. It could be anything. But first and foremost, shaitan, in order to make sure that he's going to make you inclined toward committing sins, he's going to scare you off with something first and foremost. And that's exactly what we see today. Why is it a lot of people, they commit sins? You know why? Because mentally they've told themselves there's some sort of a pleasure by committing that sin that I'm going to miss out on. In other words, there's certain things I'm going to miss out on if I don't commit that sin. You think there's some sort of a pleasure he's going to miss out on. The person, for example, that is robbing or stealing the money of another person, what is it? He's afraid that his sustenance will not be delivered. In other words, he's not going to have money. First and foremost, shaitan, he builds up that fear. He makes you scared. And then afterwards, you commit the sins. Look how precise it actually is. يَعِدُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ وَيَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ. Fahsha comes next. But first, he's going to make you scared that you're what? You're scared of missing out on that certain pleasure by committing that sin. And then afterwards, he's going to يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ. Go do the sin now. Now you're scared. Yeah? You're weak. You're mentally submitted to your own desires. Go do the sin now. Commit the sin now. So precise from a psychological perspective. How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he explains how it works when committing sins. So the concept of fear, dear brothers and sisters, it's one of the main characteristics that forms other characteristics in a human being as well. If that fear resides within our hearts, a lot of other characteristics will be defined by that fear or that bravery that resides within our hearts. So it's a main character, and it's such an important subject. Unfortunately, in a lot of our communities, it's completely overseen. We don't talk about fear from that perspective. The effect that fear has on our lives, we don't talk about that. And you see, fear is in all aspects of life. Because we got so used to having fear in our lives, we don't focus on it anymore. It's not even a bad thing anymore. Once I was sitting and listening to two brothers, and they were talking about each other, about their choice of education. Wallahi, they were bragging about their own fear to each other without even knowing. How? The person said, yeah, I don't want to become this and that, have a better salary. Basically, implicitly, what he is saying is, I'm afraid to become a social loser. That's the reason I went and studied that certain thing or certain subject. It was because of fear. It has become so normal that we're sitting and bragging about our fear to other individuals as well when we have conversations with them. And dear brothers and sisters, being brave is not only about standing up, taking a bullet in your chest. Being a brave, sometimes, you know what it means? It means that you are willing and you have the heart and you're brave enough to tell yourself, look, I'm not going to miss out on any blessings, any pleasures, if I do my duty according to Islam. If you have the heart and the bravery enough to do that, that means that you're a brave person. Sometimes we think that bravery is only what? Standing up and taking a bullet to your chest. No. See if you're submitted to your desires or not. Are you afraid of the pleasures you're going to miss out on by not committing these sins? Is that why you're sinning? That's a very important point, because we can evaluate our own actions through that. What's the reason why I keep committing this specific sin? Is it because I'm afraid? Or am I brave enough to say, no, I'm not going to commit this sin because I know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's going to take care of me. I'm not going to be afraid. I know I'm not going to miss out on any opportunities in life if I do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells me to do. I'm completely certain about it. I'm sure about it. Because if you do that, you will live a life that is not based on fear. Imam al-Khomeini rahmatullah alayhi, he said something beautiful once. He said, if it wasn't for the hellfire, a person wouldn't pray 2 rak'at anymore. Human beings wouldn't pray 2 rak'at anymore. Imagine if the prayer they told us tomorrow, the Imam of our time, he came and he said, look, the 5 obligatory prayer, they're not obligatory anymore. You don't have to perform them. Honestly, ask yourself this question. How many of us would continue praying our 5 daily prayer on time? If we were told that what? It's not wajib upon us. It's a good way to evaluate yourself. What is it that you're practicing your religion on? Based on what value? Is it really fair? 2 raka'at, we wouldn't pray it anymore. Why you see in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it clear for everyone. Nobody is allowed to scare other individuals other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody. Ajib. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that is allowed to scare us? Yes. He says it many times in the Holy Quran. And when He scares us, He does it in a specific way. Have you noticed when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala scares us, it's with a punishment in the hereafter. When we look at it, oh, it's so far away, you know, like when He scares us with a punishment that's going to be on the day of judgment. And when He does it, He still leaves the possibility for repentance open as well. So there's time to repent as well. You can repent if you still commit. But human beings, they're not allowed to scare people, other individuals. In fact, it's considered to be one of the worst traits of a human being, that you scare other individuals. Why? Because that fear for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would take that away from that person. His heart will be filled with the fear of you as a person instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will replace the fear of Allah with the fear of you. That's why we have a narration which says, شَرُّ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَتَّقِيهِ النَّاسِ مُخَافَةَ شَرِّهِ. The worst type of people are the people that what? That scares other people because they're evil. Or they're wrongdoers. In another narration, he states, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, مَنْ خَافَ النَّاسِ لِسَانَهُ فَهُوَ فِي النَّارِ. The one who scares other individuals with his tongue and fill their hearts with fear, he's in the hellfire. It's considered to be the worst traits that a human being that can have. That you're a person that people are scared of. Why? Because you're replacing the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the fear of you. People are not supposed to fear you. They're supposed to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? We're going to talk about that tomorrow, inshallah. The benefits of having fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we need to understand this principle. But unfortunately, because we live with that fear and it's present in all aspects of life, unfortunately, it's as if it's not existing in our lives anymore. It's become such a normal part of our lives that we don't even think about it. So now I'm choosing an education, for example. Is it because of fear? I'm choosing a spouse. Is it because I'm afraid I'm going to be alone? I accepted a certain job. Is that because I fear for my sustenance? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He promised me that He's going to take care of it as long as I take care of my own responsibility. We don't think about these questions. Therefore, we live with that fear and it becomes a daily part, it becomes a normal part of our lives. Essential part of our lives, in fact, unfortunately. Well, you see, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam once, please recite the salawat.
Allahumma salli ala محمد وآل محمد.
Once Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, he called his servant. Look at the seerah of the Imam alayhi salam when it comes to fear. Look at the seerah of Imam alayhi salam. So once he called his servant. He called his servant. He said, Ya Bunay. He kept calling him from the other room multiple times. He didn't reply. Normally, how would we react if we called our servant, our children, like walk into the room? Why are you not listening? I'm calling you. I'm calling your name. I know that you heard me. Why are you not replying? Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, he walks into his servant and he asks him. He said, Ya Bunay, how come you didn't reply? I was calling for you several times. His servant, he turned around. Look at this servant, the nerves he got. He turns around, look at Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. He said, I'm not afraid of you. Hey, imagine your son, you're calling him from the other room. And he turns around and he looks at you and says, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not going to reply. The first thing we think, no, astaghfirullah. The first thing we think is what? Why not listening? What do you mean you're not afraid of me? I'm calling you. Like, have some respect, right? Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, he went to sujood, he turned towards the qibla, he went in sujood and he said what? Alhamdulillahi alladhi ja'ala mamluki ya'manni. All praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that my servant does not fear me. Look at the different approach. Beautiful. He's not worried about his servant fearing him. He wants his servant to fear who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not thinking about his own personal benefits. But unfortunately, in our communities, in our societies, in our countries, it's gone to that extent that the people that are most effective in scaring other individuals, they're the one who gets the most votes. Look at the difference. If you're good at scaring people in your community, you will get the most votes. The last election you had in Sweden, who were the one who became the second largest party? Who was they? Yeah? And what is their campaign based on? These immigrants are coming, taking our job. These immigrants are coming and committing crime. Suddenly they become the second largest party in Sweden. Unfortunately, people live with that fear. And this is not only limited to Sweden. In all of Europe, you see the parties that are the most effective in scaring other people and creating fear and fear-mongering amongst people, they're the ones who are collecting the most votes. Creating fear amongst people. Why? Because people live with that fear. They come up with some great replacement theory. Oh, the surgeon, Ahmed, he came to take your job. Like, this drunkard that are sitting in his home, like living on welfare. Yeah, we came to take your job, right? People believe in that. Why? Because they live with that fear. That's the difference of the different societies and systems. While you see Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam under the system of what we call wilaya, in the caliphate of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, why was it that so many people, they had the nerve to turn against Amir al-Mu'mineen like that? Because they know Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is not someone you're going to be scared of in that sense. Yes, when it's time to wage war, he's going to do it. When it's time to draw his sword, he would do it. But he's not a person that was fear-mongering amongst people. Therefore, you see all sorts of schemes that they turned towards the Prophet. They knew, they were well aware that the Prophet, he told Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam to have patience. They knew that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was the strongest person in Medina. That's why they committed all these crimes that they committed. Because they knew Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is not a person that's going to do these things. He cares about his responsibility and his duties towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was not fear-mongering, so they were safe. They thought they were safe. In the hereafter, they're going to see. That's the concept of wilayah, the difference between the two types of system. So what is the result of having that fear? I'm going to give you one example from the history of Islam so you understand how crucial and how important it is for us to understand the concept of fear in Islamic history and how it affects our lives as human beings. So if you look at the people of Kufa that ended up turning against Imam Hussein alayhi salam, do you think that these people was individuals that were sitting day out and day in talking bad about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, talking negatively about Abu Abdullah alayhi salam? Do you think that they didn't know any virtue from Imam Hussein? They were the one inviting Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They were well aware of who Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, who he was. But because of their fear for the army of Yazid, they ended up being the killer of the same person they invited to rule them. Look how fear can actually affect you to that extent. Because if you are examined with fear and you don't overcome that fear as a believer, even as a follower of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, it's going to have some unwanted consequences. This is one of them. You got to be submitted to the oppressors of your time. And the people of Kufa, they're the best example of that. We have in our narrations that even some of these people that were in Karbala, while they were drawing sword against the family of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, they were shedding tears while doing that. They were crying. But they were fearing who? Even some of the individuals that showed up, they were afraid that the army of Yazid is going to kill them. But they got killed in Karbala instead. Look how sorry it is. How sad, isn't it? That because of your fear of certain individuals, you end up killing a just person, but you get killed in that as well. Subhanallah. Because of what? The fear that was residing within their hearts. How dangerous the concept of fear. If we don't learn how to deal and overcome that fear, how it can affect our lives. This is an extreme example, I understand that. But we see the exact same thing in our community. We see the exact same thing. A lot of the sins that are being committed, it's due to fear as well. Yes, the people of Kufa didn't start out with killing Imam Hussein alayhi salam. The fear built up gradually, which made them turn against Imam Hussein alayhi salam and commit that crime that they committed. Don't think it's going to start like overnight. They're just going to do that. No, the fear builds up. If you don't deal with that fear and overcome that fear, it's going to build up. I'm going to give you an example of another person in the Islamic history, and maybe you're going to be surprised by that because a lot of people, they don't know about this person. So, one of the famous shuhada of Karbala who got shaheed in Kufa before the tragedy in Karbala happened, who was he? Muslim ibn Aqil. So Muslim ibn Aqil means what? Muslim, the son of who? Aqil. Aqil is who? The brother of who? Imam Ali alayhi salam. Aqil ibn Abi Talib. So in the Islamic history, we have a source that says that Aqil ibn Abi Talib, he joined the camp of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. Did you know that? Yeah, have you heard it before? He joined the camp of who? Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. So what's my point here? My point is, was it because he didn't know the virtues of Ali ibn Abi Talib, his own brother? This father of such a great shaheed like Muslim ibn Aqil, he didn't know the virtues of Ahlul Bayt. He was from Bani Hashim. So in a source, we have a historical source that we have. He comes to the camp of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. You know what happens? Muawiyah asks him. He asks him, he says, tell me about the difference between my camp and the camp of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You know what he says? Look, he admitted himself. He admitted himself. What does he say? He said, when I was in the camp of Ali ibn Abi Talib, I felt like I was in the camp of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, with one exception, that Rasulullah was not present himself. At night, people were standing in prayer. At daytime, people were fighting fi sabilillah. But when I came to your camp, I saw all the hypocrites that were in the time of the Prophet as well. At nighttime, everybody would sleep. At daytime, they would rob people. He's well aware of where he ended up. And he's well aware of the differences between the two camps. So what made him join this camp? Look, how fear, what it can drive you into. الشيطان يعيدكم الفقر ويأمركم بالفحشاء. Always remember this verse. And then afterwards, remember Aqil ibn Abi Talib. So Muawiyah said, so why is it that you came here? Why did you join our camp if that's the case? He said, because I have some desires that you're going to meet. I have some desires. I know you're going to satisfy my need when it comes to those desires. In other words, he was afraid that he's going to miss out on an opportunity, on some pleasures. So he left the camp of a person, his own brother. His own son was from that camp, right? And he was well aware of the virtues that resides within that camp. The mu'mineen in that camp. Because of what? Fear. That's it. Look how dangerous it actually is if you don't overcome that fear, if you don't take care of that fear. Your life will be completely different if you take care of it. Go home. If you're able to clean your house without being afraid that your guest is going to see the house being completely destroyed, yeah? Try to clean the house just for the sake of, I want it to be organized. I know the action is the same, but the mentality is completely different. But get used to it. Try to do things not out of fear of something, because of the love and passion for something. Because when you do that, you will maximize your creativity, you will maximize your affection and love for that certain thing and the values that lies behind that thing as well. Not because of fear. I do it just because I want things to be organized. Then you're going to see, you're going to be organized in other aspects of life as well suddenly. Why? Because it's not only driven by fear anymore. Your life will be completely different. In a beautiful narration we have that when a father, he knocks on the door and he's wants to enter his house, he should make a lot of noise. So I was thinking about this hadith and I was like, how come? Why make a lot of noise? You should, knock on the door, be loud, Ya Allah, Salaam Alaikum, this, that. One of our teachers, he said something beautifully. He said, if the people in the house are doing something which displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it shouldn't be because of the father that they quit that action. Let it be because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, he should make sure when he comes, they know now, when my dad comes, he makes a lot of noise. I'm not scared of my father. Make a lot of noise when you walk into the home. Why? Let your family know, I'm not the one that you're supposed to be scared of. You should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not me. I'm not here to make you afraid of anything. Look at the difference in mentality. This is very important for us to understand. Even when it comes to studying as well, dear brothers and sisters. A lot of us, we take an education, we take a certain degree in something because of our fear that we're going to miss out on an opportunity, we're going to miss out on something. Unfortunately, we see in a lot of our communities, even when it comes to economy. And the fact is that we have a narration that says the opposite. They say if you accept a job because of your fear that you're going to be provided for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make you poor. Allah's going to make you poor. Why? You're supposed to do your duty. Pick a job, not according to what? Because of fear. Don't be driven by fear. Understand that sustenance is what? Is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not His creations. They can't do nothing if Allah prevents it from happening. If He don't want it, it's not going to happen. So if we delete that fear from the equation, dear brothers and sisters, our lives would change completely. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not enter a heart which is filled with fear, a heart which is scared. The best example is the example of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Just listen to this story and imagine yourself being in that situation. How would you react as a person? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the order to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and He told him, fight against Nimrud. Rebel against Nimrud. He did. He said, yes, I'm going to do it, no problem. Because God says it, I'm going to do it. They put him in a catapult. They wanted to throw Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam into the fire. What happened? On the way in the air, Jibreel alayhi salam, he came to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. In that situation, when we know that we are about to be thrown into the fire, how will we react? Please save me. I'm in a bad situation here. Help me out. Give me a hand here. I'm on my way to the hellfire. Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he looked at Jibreel. Look at the bravery here. Yeah, look at the bravery of Ibrahim alayhi salam. He looked at Jibreel. He said, as long as Allah sees me, I don't need your help. Allah told me to do it. He's going to take care of me. What can you do? He tells that to who? Jibreel. How would we react in that situation? The first characteristic that our urafa, they find when it comes to seeking closeness to Allah is what? They become brave. Brave enough to tell themselves, by living this life and taking this responsibility, I'm not going to miss out on anything in life. I'm sure about that. There's no pleasure that Allah can give me in those sins, which He's not going to give me in what? Living in accordance to what He wants from me. This bravery they find first and foremost. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enters a heart which is filled with bravery and it's empty of fear. That's why you see, if you want to pass an exam, you do what the exam tells you to do, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Holy Quran, وَلِنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. That's the first thing. He's going to test us with something of fear. In other words, overcome that fear, you pass the first exam. You succeeded. But it all dependent on what? That we overcome that fear. And that's why you see the majority of the verses and the teachings of the Holy Quran focuses on that as well. All the messages of the different verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Himself is for us to get rid of that fear. يُذِلُّ مَن يَشَاءُ وَيَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ. He's the one that guides people. What does that mean? Don't be afraid if people get guided or not. It's in my hands. وَيَرْزُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. I'm the one who brings sustenance to my creations. بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. In other words, it's in my hands. Even when the Prophet ﷺ, he shot an arrow, what did he tell the Prophet? وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the one who shot that arrow. In other words, it's in my hands. If I don't want that arrow to hit, it's not going to hit its target. But because I wanted it to hit its target, it's going to hit the target. You just make sure to do your duty, but understand that everything is in the control of what? Of me. He's telling us that everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is it that children, they're so beautifully, they can play, have no fear when they play around. They're so calm when they play. Why? Because they know that everything is in the hands of who? Imagine that children had the fear of where the next meal is going to come from. They wouldn't be able to play. They would be distressed all the time. But because they're convinced that my parents are going to take care of me, they can play with completely calmness. Because they know that what? Sustenance, my parents are going to take care of me. Look at the mindset. The same mindset we should have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we don't, unfortunately. So we do all sorts of weird things to make sure that the sustenance that we are being provided for, unfortunately. Another example is one of the shuhada throughout the history of Islam. What made him one of the most important or most lovable or most attracted amongst the shuhada, amongst the martyrs? A person by the name of Abul Fadl Abbas. When we refer to him, what virtue is it that separates him from the other shuhada of Karbala? What is it? His bravery. The fact that he was brave, he had no fear. وَالشِّمْرِ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ, came to him because they were related. Abu Fadl Abbas, from his mother's side, he was related to Shimr. He came to him and he said, I'm going to give you a peace treaty. I'm going to give you a peace treaty. Don't worry about it. He said, may God curse you in that peace treaty. I don't want it. Imagine being surrounded by 30,000 men with swords and you know they're going to put your head on a spear. And they come and tell you, look, I'm going to give you a peace treaty. We're not going to hurt you. We're going to hurt the rest. Look at the loyalty. That's being brave, dear brothers and sisters. That's why Abu Fadl Abbas, he separates himself from the other martyrs of Islam. Why? Because a brave person is something which it's attractive as a person if he's brave. That's why he's separated from the rest. And even when they cut off his right arm, what did he say? Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini inni uhami abadan an dini. Even if you cut off my arms, I will still defend my religion. Is that a scared person or a brave person? Brave person. Don't think that because he was the brother of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, therefore we give him such a great importance. This is the reason why we give him such a great importance. Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they had family members. I just gave you an example. Aqil ibn Abi Talib. Wasn't he the brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Just being related to someone doesn't have an importance. Being related to someone and fulfill that responsibility you have towards the Imam of your time matters. That's why Abu Fadl Abbas was such a great person. In another narration from Abu Fadl Abbas, which is related to the incident of Fatimya, and what happened in Fatimya was that once al-Baneen, she came into the room and she saw Abu Fadl Abbas. al-Baneen, she raised Abu Fadl Abbas with such a great respect for the children of Fatima. He was known for that. Every time they would used to see their brother in the alley, and when they were walking, when Zainab, it's his sister, say the Zainab, it's his sister. When she passed by, he would lower his gaze and say, Salam alaikum sayyidati. And Sayyida Zainab would turn towards Abu Fadl Abbas. She said, there's no need for that. You know, I'm your sister. What is it? Al-Baneen, he raised her son with such a great respect for Fatimah al-Zahra salamun alayha, that when it came to Sayyida Zainab, he had such a huge respect. When he saw Hussein, when he saw Hassan alayhim wassalam, he would have such a huge respect for these persons. He would call them Sayyidi. But once Al-Baneen, she came into the room and she saw Abu Fadl Abbas, he was sitting in the room. And he was hitting with his fist to the ground. And it was uncommon for Abu Fadl Abbas to do that. He was a young man at that time. Baneen, she looks at him. She was like, my Abbas, what's wrong? What's matter? She said, Ya Ummi, tell me what's the reason why every time we pass by this alley, I see my brother Hassan, he falls to his knees. Say, Ya Ummi, how come every time we pass by this alley, I see my brother Hussein, he starts to shed tears? Please tell me what happened in this alley. I'm going to kill those people, he told Baneen. Normally when a fight occurs, dear brothers and sisters, normally when a fight occurs in the street, the first thing that we think of is to stop that fight. But if we see that it's a group of men on one side and it's a woman on the other side, we don't think about stopping that fight. We think about defending that woman in that situation. But imagine that you suddenly find out that this woman that they are hitting in the street is your own mother. Imagine the woman that you're seeing that they are hitting, let alone just a woman or your mother, and you know she's pregnant as well. Would you just stand there? Would you just look? Would you be careless walking past? The people of Medina, they saw what happened. Unfortunately, they did nothing not even to stop it, unfortunately. And Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, they were so oppressed. Then when Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, they carried Fatimah al-Zahra salamullah alayha towards the grave. The children, they were crying out loud. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he told his children, he told Hassan, Hussein, Zainab, put your sleeves in your mouth so people can't hear you cry. Put your sleeves in your mouth so people can't hear you cry. Because I don't want them to know where your mother Fatima is buried. Ala la'natullah ala qawmid al-zalimin. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tayyibin al-tahirin.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.